West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Cases Jack Smith has already put pressure on defendant Trump after winning that partial gag order. Now, if you've been following the news at all here in America, you probably know that D.A. Willis has just won convictions on the eve of her first RICO trial. Indeed, that trial was supposed to start today, but she won it so decisively, there is no trial. I'll explain. Two Trump lawyers pled guilty 2 days in a row to end just last week. Defendant Trump is showing new concern today that he is worried they will testify against him and it will be damaging. He's posted a new statement which asserts, referring to Sidney Powell, that she was, quote, one of millions who thought the 2020 presidential election was rigged and stolen. That's his typo, by the way. He goes on to say, quote, Ms. Powell was not my attorney and never was. That claim is false, but it is also telling. And I'll show you exactly why. But here was then lead Trump attorney Giuliani introducing his co-counsel turned co-defendants, Powell and Ellis.
This is representative of our legal team. We're representing President Trump and we're representing the Trump campaign. When I finish, Sidney Powell and then Jenna Ellis will follow me.
Powell and Ellis from the mouth of Giuliani, and you see them there. Also having a sidebar chat at their many press conferences during that period that they were trying to steal the election. Powell worked for Trump. Trump even mused about promoting her to a newly created position that would have helped with a potential military coup plot, which they did abandon. So what I just told you about Donald Trump's effort to muddy their links now and what she did for him is a very specific thing. It is an acknowledgement in a way that she matters. It is a response to her and the other attorney Chesbrough flipping at the end of last week.
How do you plead to the 6 counts of conspiracy to commit intentional interference with performance of election duties?
Guilty.
How do you plead to count 15, conspiracy to commit filing false documents in indictment number 23SC188947?
Guilty.
Can you please state your true and correct legal name?
Sidney Catherine Powell.
State your true and correct legal name.
Kenneth John Chesbrough.
How old are you, ma'am?
Oh, gosh. 68, despite my astonishingly youthful countenance.
How old are you and how far did you go in school, sir?
62, I went through law school.
Are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a sufficient factual basis, that there are enough facts that support this plea of guilty?
I do.
Are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a factual basis that supports this remaining charge?
Yes, this charge.
Yes, I do. Guilty. They did it. That's what went down in that courtroom at the end of the week, Thursday, Friday. There is a lot going on, whether you follow international news, which of course affects so many people, including people in the United States, and we've all been covering that, living through it. There's also a lot going on in politics. The speaker's race, the vacancy there, Donald Trump's nominee, Jim Jordan, having to bow out after being rejected by Republicans. So whatever you're interested in terms of national news, there's a lot going on. And Thursday and Friday, those were big stories. We covered them here, but anyone could be forgiven for busily going on with their day and not knowing all the details of that. But Donald Trump knows the details. He is on this like a laser right now because he understands that these are people who can't just be dismissed legally. He can attack them publicly, politically, rhetorically. But legally, these are witnesses. They will be sworn in under oath. And if these cases proceed as we expect, juries will hear these people who aren't just saying bad things about Trump, but they're people who fought for Trump to the very end, up until their own indictment. And so for some jurors, that might be more credible than, say, other people who are seen to be critical or observing at a distance. You know, a witness can be at a distance, too. A witness can say, I saw him across the way. I mean, the Georgia elections official who heard Trump's phone call asking to find votes, he's a witness, but at a distance. These people are right up close. These lawyers know a lot from their own roles. Remember, Powell is also listed as co-conspirator 3 in Jack Smith's Trump indictment, which showed evidence of her working on those Trump briefs in lawsuits and responding to legal plans, where they discussed putting material for suits in Georgia and Pennsylvania. But if Trump commits to his new denial in court, he'll actually undercut efforts to keep any conversations with Powell privileged. So he's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, even if he's lying about the fact that, of course, she was his lawyer. But what is happening in this case, big picture, as we take it all in and Trump responds today? One, prosecutors are winning the first clashes with Trump over what are now his aides' convicted crimes to steal an American election. That's a big deal. That's never happened before, and Trump's aides are losing. Now, that could change. But early cases matter a lot because they set a precedent and they set up evidence, including witnesses, right? We call that testimonial evidence. It's just witnesses for later cases, and that goes up the line. So that's one big thing tonight as we start the week. Two, we're seeing some of the critical cooperating witnesses come into view. Trump and the prosecutors could disagree on practically everything. We don't often come on the air and tell you about how D.A. Willis and Trump or Jack Smith and Trump agree on things, but check this out tonight as we start the week and Trump goes public on what is clearly scaring him. Here's one thing they do agree on, Trump and D.A. Willis. They agree that Sidney Powell matters. As a convicted criminal, veteran Trump aide, and cooperating witness, Powell matters. She matters to prosecutors who will use her and her testimony to try to put others on trial. It is a group RICO case. Most people haven't been tried yet. But Trump, the defendant, also thinks she matters. In fact, he thinks she matters so much that he's not just doing the thing of turning on her in public, but he's trying to specifically make claims to distance her from him, as he has with others beforehand. We've seen that. Now that brings me to point 3. Some dominoes are falling. A few could have predicted at the beginning who would crack first. And by the way, if you were playing that game, many would not have predicted Sidney Powell. She sometimes performed as such a supposed true believer that even Trump reportedly dubbed her, quote, crazy. But Powell's the first domino in Trump's orbit, and her public vow to testify against others made her former colleague Chesbrough crack and confess, as I showed you the very next day, Friday. If you follow the news, you may recall it. If you were busy on your Friday, you may not know, oh, another one cracked, another domino fell. He would have faced her damning testimony at his own trial and risked much harsher jail punishment if convicted. So tonight, as we start the new week and Trump responds, the big question is, of course, the simple one. Sometimes this stuff's complicated. Sometimes it ain't that complicated. Are there more dominoes? We don't know. I can't tell you. I can't prove that up yet. It's a predictive matter at this point. I can report for you that the DA is building a RICO case with a theory of dominoes, that they want more than 2. They got 3 total. They got 2 Trump dominoes, people who work with him, and they want more. These 2 witnesses could be incriminating for others linked to the coup efforts. And specifically, the other top defendant other than former President Trump is White House veteran Mark Meadows, who was getting updates from Powell about her plot to, we now can say, illegally abuse voting software. As of Thursday, that became a now convicted crime in the Georgia plot, that voting data breach, a brazen scheme to break into local voting machines. That's sort of physical vote stealing, different than sort of the broader Washington-based coup ideas. So Powell can testify about what Mark Meadows knew about that and whether he participated in it. She could also speak to Meadows' potential culpability in the charges he faces for soliciting the violation of oath by a public officer in those broader efforts that I mentioned, talking to a Georgia elections official. Just as the other convicted Trump legal vet, Chesbrough, can testify about whether Meadows or others participated in the elector fraud, which is now his confessed guilty portion of the plotting. And that is the first felony confession by any Trump aide for Jan 6 activities. He put those plots in writing. And you can see here at the very bottom that data breach convicted is the Powell plot. The electors plot, the very first on top, and it's first up there because it started the earliest, is now convicted. I cannot fairly or journalistically tell you whether any of those other plots will be convicted. They are indicted, but legally, the people that are indicted for those yellow plots are presumed innocent. We will see what happens. I can tell you that the red arrows on your screen are now, in all of American history, these convicted Trump coup crimes. That's new as of Thursday and Friday. And for all the talk about whether people believe their own lies on behalf of Donald Trump or others, I want to show you something else relatively recent as we take all this new information together. Notice how I'm going to show you both in the courtroom and in general. Chesbrough's lawyer confirms all along the big lie that Chesbrough, the now convicted felony Trump aide, knew Donald Trump lost.
The defendant created and distributed false electoral college documents to individuals in Georgia and other states.
Mr. Chesbrough never believed in the big lie.
And are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a factual basis that supports this remaining charge?
Yes, this charge.
If you ask Mr. Chesbrough today who won the 2020 presidential election, he would say Joe Biden.
If you asked him, well, who was asking? That's not a rhetorical question, as they say. D.A. Willis's team could ask him, as well as the other convict, Sidney Powell, under oath about that set of activities, that coup-related crime, that now convicted fraud felony. They could ask what other co-defendants did. Now, Chesbrough is less well-known than, say, Powell, but he worked with the very well-known Giuliani and Eastman, both of whom, I should say, if I want to get my grammar right, but both of whom were architects of not only what went down in Georgia, which is being prosecuted for specific reasons based on the evidence there, but what stretched all the way back to Washington, to the coup plot, to what Jim Jordan and Ted Cruz and others hoped to do in Washington. So with the lies crumbling and some of these convicted lawyers for Donald Trump now turning state's witness, the big question is the simple one. Sometimes the big questions are simple. Is this the beginning of many dominoes falling? Or, again, in fairness to the other defendants and the theory of the case, is this a few people cracking early, people who had agitated for a speedy trial? Those lawyers requested it. And that doesn't mean that we're going to get 5 more dominoes. That is the big question. And like I mentioned, in all reality, there's a lot going on. So not everyone is following this super closely. It is the top story right now tonight because it's a big deal when the top people who work directly for the former president of the United States admit in court, we did it.
It is Tuesday, the 24th of October of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Yeah. You know, the spice trade is still a very important component in the workings of the world, if you didn't know. It is. It does. Even more than oil. Surprising, huh? Yeah, it is. Well, that little tidbit pales in comparison to the dominoes falling in the Georgia election interference case. My. Yeah, so when I chose the clip for the opening today, and I did that last night because I've decided, rather than scramble and put the last bits of the curated part of the show together, maybe I should be, well, I don't know, laborious. Is that how it, laborious? I don't know. I hope it's not laborious, regardless. I figured that I'd, get things done a bit earlier. And I got to tell you, Jenna Ellis flipping was not on my radar, though we have been discussing once these two lawyers, and let's not forget the bail bondsman. Okay, we got a bail bondsman and 3 lawyers. They all walked into a bar. And we'll finish that joke later because, they have to go to court. Or no, I guess they already went to court. They're pleading guilty, and now they'll go to court because they will be testifying against Donald Trump. So Jenna has pled guilty to lying about lying to the legislature of Georgia that they apparently had evidence of dead people voting. 9,000 votes that just mysteriously appeared or disappeared. Something. She's basically pled guilty to making false statements to a government body. So you can have that happen, apparently, if you're doing it under color of the law. So, yeah, you got 3 lawyers and a bail bondsman, and they walk into a bar. It just happens to be the Bar Association because they're going to be put on a ringer. I'm sure they are. Or through the ringer. If you get put on the ringer, I don't think much will happen. But if you're put through the ringer, it just might, flatten you out a little bit. Squeeze. Or crush, depending on your point of view. Okay, well, it's still the morning, and I failed to... Well, I turned the new dishwasher on, put it through its whole different cycles. I wanted the storm wash because I inadvertently scorched a sauce in a pan. And I thought, I'm going to try this out, see how well it cleans up this scorched part. And there's a lot of automated aspects to this dishwasher. And I went through all the different functions I wanted to have on and said it was going to take, about 3 hours, which is okay. That's fine because I'm sanitizing too. And got up this morning and realized, oh, darn, there's lights blinking on the dishwasher. Why is that? And I went to it, and no time had gone off on the dishwasher. It still said it's like 3 hours and 18 minutes. I'm like, what? And opened it up, and everything was still in place. It's dirty in there. And I realized I didn't hit start. Got to hit the start, okay? The most important component of how a machine works. Smart as they are, you got to do a lot of thinking still. Okay, that's what I get for getting sucked into the rabbit hole of young people who are seeing bands that I just take for granted for the first time. So I was listening to all sorts of different young people all the way up into their 30s extolling how great bands last night I was listening to Jethro Tull. This guy knows how to play flute. He's such a great showman. No shit, Sherlock. That's why we went to his shows. Man, you should have seen a passion play at the Forum. The old Forum before it was a Mark Taper. Man, that was a show. And one young person said, what's he going to do next? Flip his flute up in the air in between notes and catch it and keep playing? Yes, that's exactly what Ian Anderson would do. He was a circus showman. He was an acrobat. He would do backflips on stage while playing the flute. He didn't just stand there with one leg like a stork. Okay. All right. So that was fun, but I got sucked into a rabbit hole and looked up and realized, wow, it's late. I got to get to bed so I can get up and do my show. And here we are. Alrighty. The world is still on fire. And I wonder, has it ever not been on fire? Man. I sometimes wonder if we have been consigned to hell, if not purgatory. Okay? Because there's still quite a bit of beauty involved here. And then there's all this hellish BS of like death and destruction and greed and dominance. And I always like the kind of world where, hey, can I lend you a hand? And you would. And people would say, sure. Without chopping it off. Okay? Or as some cynical members of our family might say, you know, if you go out and help somebody, you're just giving them an excuse to blame you for it. What? That guy helped me. It's his fault that I broke the law. Really? He gave me some food. He's implicated. All right. Well, what a beautiful and terrible world we live in. And as far as we know, it might be the only one we got. So I choose to, I don't know. I like to lend a hand. The idea of being greedy and heartless and, I don't know. Just, how does one live with themselves? I'm finding it increasingly difficult as I get older and I realize all the slights that I slighted people and loved ones. And is there any way to say you're sorry? I was an idiot. I had no idea what I was thinking. I thought I knew what I was thinking at the time, but I was an idiot. Why do we have to wait until the end before we realize what idiots we might have been? Jeez. Okay, well, I suppose part of imparting wisdom is learning by your mistakes and, I don't know, telling kids while they're young enough when you can tell them, do not go down that path. Don't. You'll be sorry. Okay. And then when they start going down that path, you might remind them. But you got to let them do what they're going to do. And hopefully you've imparted some sort of wisdom so that when they get a little bit older, they realize what idiots they might have been if only they hadn't been idiots. Okay. The human condition. What do we have in store for you in the rest of this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy that really speaks directly to the human condition? Well, on the rest of the menu, a Montana man was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for repeated racist phone calls made to a church. There just happened to be a black lady there, kind of working in the, what do they call it? Oh, I guess it was a Catholic church. She was working in the rectory. And apparently this Montana man just did not like that. Oh, my. The Justice Department has issued subpoenas after expanding its investigations, plural, into Tesla beyond the electric car maker's partially automated driving systems. And they're not asking nicely. They're issuing subpoenas. And North Dakota's Republican-dominated legislature began a special session to fix the budget invalidated as unconstitutional by the Republican-dominated state Supreme Court. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a prominent German leftist is set to launch a new party that could eat into the far right's support. They do it differently there. Huh. And Orban blasted the European Union on the anniversary of Hungary's 1956 anti-Soviet uprising as being just like the Soviets. Yeah, Orban. Okay, isn't he from Turkey? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and she is quite busy in real life, so we thank Kelly for not only monitoring the chat room but also for everything else that she does here at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Kelly. If you out there in radio listening land would now take a look to the left from that chat room link that's near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and hopefully you'll notice right there is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills. Now, though we pull out of our own pockets quite a bit of money to keep this concern going, we would be unable to do it without you. Now, if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that really does help us put a big dent in those bills and other costs. And we thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook even, you can do so by going to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, though I think actually Kelly takes care of the Facebook page, but Tom takes care of all the others, so thank you, Tom. And he as well is busy in real life, and we thank him for not only taking care of those social media feeds, but he does a lot of other things as well. And so thank you both for everything that you do here at Netroots Radio. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, I would suggest that you do. And also on Mastodon and Spoutable and Blue Sky and Instagram and Tumblr and Facebook. You can do so at Justice Putnam or simply Justice Putnam, depending, of course. And I post the Show Notes and Links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime so that people can have actual access to the actual reportage that inspires us here in this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which also you can follow the show on Twitter. It's just kind of a placemat, but we'll get on it at Cookbook West. And most importantly, if you could pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, that would be totally great. And please do. You're just not going to find them on Stitcher, because when you go to the Stitcher page, it'll say, they don't do it anymore. Okay, they don't. But you can find us everywhere else, along with everybody else. So there you go. Okay, thank you. Let us now take a look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it is by staff at the U.S. desk. Oh, yeah, the domestic desk at the Associated Press. A Montana man has been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for making repeated threatening and racist phone calls to a Billings church for 2 years after he went there seeking help and received a gift card from a black employee. Joshua Leon Hestand, age 41, was sentenced on Friday, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Montana. Hestand pleaded guilty in June to making harassing telephone calls. A stalking charge was dismissed as part of the plea agreement. When Hestand, a white man, went to a Billings church looking for help, an elderly African-American woman who worked there responded with kindness and assistance. U.S. Attorney Jesse Laslovich said in a statement, "In return, and for nearly 2 years, Hestand launched a barrage of harassing, hateful, and racist calls and voicemails at her and the church. His racist conduct isn't just abhorrent, it is illegal." Now, prosecutors alleged Hestand went to the Presbyterian Church, Presbyterian, in November of 2020 seeking help. 5 days later, the church received a voicemail in which someone, using a racially derogatory term, said he would give more money to the church if the church did not employ an African American. I think they're saying that he used the N-word instead of African American. Now, after 3 similar calls, the woman called Billings police. A detective called the number used to leave the messages and spoke to Hestand, who admitted making the calls and apologized for his behavior. He was told to have no further contact with the church. 3 days later, he left a voicemail with the church in which he apologized, court records said. However, over the next 19 months, Hestand called and left a series of voicemails at the church that were at times threatening and racially hostile. Prosecutors said investigators determined that after January of 2021, Hestand was placing the calls from outside the state of Montana. Oh, now it's a federal crime. He was arrested in November of 2022 in Indiana and has remained in custody since then. His public defender, Jillian Ghosh, asked for a sentence of time served, arguing her client's actions were affected by his mental health issues. You can tell he's white, which have resulted in psychiatric hospitalizations and which appear to be worsened by his use of illegal substances. Is that it? The Bureau of Prisons will decide whether Hestand will receive credit for the 11 months he has already been in custody. Officials said Hestand remained in custody in Yellowstone County Jail as of yesterday. Krisher of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Federal prosecutors have expanded investigations into Tesla beyond the electric vehicle maker's partially automated driving systems, and they have issued subpoenas for information instead of simply requesting it, the company disclosed yesterday, Monday. In a quarterly report filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, Tesla said the Department of Justice is looking into, quote, personal benefits, related parties, vehicle range, and personnel decisions, end quote, without giving details. The additional investigation topics and the subpoena suggest that prosecutors have broadened their inquiry, and they found the need to force Tesla to disclose the information, legal experts say. The filing indicates prosecutors may be investigating Elon Musk and whether the company has been candid in describing the features of its vehicles. In January, Tesla disclosed that the Justice Department had requested documents related to its autopilot and full self-driving features. Both features are classified as driver assist systems, and the company says on its website that the vehicles cannot drive themselves. Now, the company is disclosing a probe that is a lot wider than just looking at autopilot and FSD features, said Eric Gordon, a University of Michigan business and law professor. The DOJ often starts with a formal written request and escalates to administrative subpoenas if it thinks it is not getting full cooperation, he said. Specifying additional items that prosecutors are looking at indicates that Tesla lawyers found them serious enough to change the company's public disclosures, Gordon said. Tesla did not respond to a request for comment, but the company, now based in Austin, Texas, said in its SEC filing that to its knowledge, no government agency has concluded that any wrongdoing happened in any ongoing investigation, and the Justice Department declined to comment because that's what they always do. For the first time, Tesla said in its filing that the investigations could damage the company's brand. Should the government decide to pursue an enforcement action, there exists the possibility of a material adverse impact on our business, results of operation, prospects, cash flows, financial position, or brand, the filing said, whining. Jacob Frankel, a former SEC enforcement attorney and ex-federal prosecutor, said, specifically pointing out personal benefits and related parties suggests a possible connection to Musk. Disclosing that vehicle range is under scrutiny also reflects a concern about the company's representations about vehicle features, said Frankel, now a partner with Dickinson Wright in Washington. It's unclear if Tesla merely considered subpoenas as requests for information in prior quarterly disclosures, Frankel said. Now, the broader inquiry, including relating to the autopilot and full self-driving features, appears subject to subpoena. Jack Dura of the Associated Press brings us his final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. North Dakota's Republican-controlled legislature began a special session yesterday, Monday, to redo a key budget bill the state Supreme Court voided last month, leaving a giant hole in government operations. Lawmakers quickly began hearings on 14 bills for restoring the provisions of the major budget bill voided by the High Court, which invalidated the bill as unconstitutional because it violated a single subject requirement for bills. The bill has traditionally been used as a catch-all or cleanup bill passed at the end of the biennial session. Republican Governor Doug Burgum, who is running for president, urged the legislature to take up other items using higher than forecasted excess state tax revenue. Those include $91 million for expanding a previous income tax cut, $50 million for infrastructure projects, and $20 million to expand a tourism attraction grant program the governor said has drawn great interest. The State House voted later in the day to introduce a bill for the tax proposal. Republican House Majority Leader Mike LaFleur said, "The time is now, and the time is right." Due to the state's glowing financial picture, with nearly $300 million more on hand than what the legislature had forecasted at the end of its session in April. Brigham told reporters that his proposals are just adding appropriations to existing programs, with a fantastic opportunity for this legislature to do something more than just procedural fixes. He also advocated for low-hanging fruit items such as fixing language of a military income tax exemption and allowing the University of North Dakota and Bismarck State College to receive non-state funds for improvements on campus. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Even if you are a safe, experienced driver, accidents can happen at any time. Young children are especially at risk for injury and death in a motor vehicle crash. Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz is a researcher with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of keeping children properly restrained in motor vehicles. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you.
Erin, how many children are killed or injured each year in a motor vehicle crash in the U.S.?
In 2013, 638 children aged 12 and under died in a crash, and over 127,000 were injured.
How effective have child safety seats and other safety devices been in preventing injuries and death among children?
Car seats and booster seats are very effective at preventing injury and death in a crash, but the most effective seat is the one that parents use to buckle their kids on every drive.
Where's the safest place for children to ride in a car?
The back seat is the safest place for children to ride in a car, buckled in an age and size-appropriate car seat, booster seat, or seatbelt.
How long should a child ride in a safety seat?
Children should use a car seat until they're at least 5 years old, and a booster seat until the adult seatbelt fits properly. The adult seatbelt fits properly when the lap belt lays across the upper thighs, not the stomach, and the shoulder belt lays across the shoulder, not the neck.
Erin, where should parents go in their community to get help installing and using car seats?
Parents can get one-on-one help free of charge from a certified child passenger safety technician. You can find a tech near you at cert.safekids.org and click on Find a Tech. Another option is to check with your local police or fire department.
Aaron, where can listeners get more information about restraining children properly in motor vehicles?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov and type in the search box, Child Passenger Safety.
Thanks, Aaron. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Aaron Sauber-Schatz about the importance of keeping kids safe in a motor vehicle. Remember, for children under the age of 13, properly restrain them in the back seat. If you're unsure about how to install or use car seats, check with your local police or fire department. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. October 19th, the North Carolina Senate Redistricting Committee presented its latest congressional redistricting maps. After 3 years of wrangling, including 2 state Supreme Court cases and a U.S. Supreme Court case, it's now more gerrymandered than its original 2021 map. When conservatives took control of the North Carolina Supreme Court this spring, they immediately overturned decisions made by the previous court, which threw out the 2021 proposal as unconstitutional and ordered a more competitive map. That map had 6 Democratic-leaning seats, 7 Republican-leaning seats, and 1 highly competitive seat. Conservatives argued they should have had a 9-5 GOP advantage. That map was challenged in the U.S. Supreme Court's Moore v. Harper, the independent state legislature case. Justices shot down the fringe ISL theory, but the state court later vacated the competitive map, leaving it again to a legislature drunk on partisan power to draw the maps. Last week, 2 new gerrymandered proposals abandoned any pretense of competitive districts. Analysis by WFAE Public Radio shows one version packing Republicans into 11 districts and Democrats into 3, and in the second, packing Republicans into 10 districts, Democrats into 3, and 1 toss-up. Whichever map is chosen, it's likely to face a court challenge, but pending a decision, it may be in place for the 2024 election. We have links to the maps and analysis at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1940. That was the day that the federally mandated 40-hour work week went into effect for U.S. workers. The 40-hour week had been passed as part of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. Making 5 days of 8 hours work the national standard had long been a top goal for labor. For decades, union members organized, demonstrated, went on strike, and even died for the right to work 8 hours. Labor argued that reducing the long, unregulated hours of toil was a matter of workers' health and safety. It was also a matter of dignity. A more reasonable work week would give workers the time to spend with their families, to pursue other interests, and to have a full life outside of the grinding schedule demanded by many bosses. Before the turn of the 20th century, the 8-hour day movement declared 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will as their motto. In 1886, nationwide rallies and strikes for 8 hours took place on May 1st. Today, May Day is celebrated as a workers' holiday around the world in remembrance of that struggle. In 1888, the American Federation of Labor took up the cause, and the Carpenters Union became the standard bearer for the 8-hour day. 10 years later, the United Mine Workers Union members won the 8-hour workday. In 1916, the Adamson Act made 8 hours the standard for interstate railroad workers. A decade after that, Ford Motor Company, a leader in U.S. industry, established the 40-hour workweek. Each of these victories were a step along the way to making the 8-hour day a reality and the law of the land. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs of only around 61. Cloudy conditions with occasional showers later this morning and this afternoon, winds light and variable, and then rain showers earlier in the evening and will evolve into a more steady rain overnight, bringing with it over a quarter-inch of rain counting today and tonight. Lows will be in the low 40s. Chilly. We're getting chilly nights, winds light and variable, and overcast with rain showers tomorrow, highs in the low 50s. Winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we're looking at another quarter-inch of rain tomorrow night. And much cooler nights. Looks like we'll be dipping into the 20s over the weekend. Oh, my. Pollen is rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 41 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is now in the low range at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.03 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 58 degrees, partly cloudy with potential disruption due to rain. Paris is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 71 degrees with rain and potential disruptions due to thunderstorms. We're not able to get Kabul anymore, but we got Bagram in Afghanistan, and they are now 55 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. The People's Republic of China is blocking Hong Kong at the moment, so we'll get Beijing Their weather is now registering 78 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 64 degrees and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 50 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 58 with fog. Chicago, Illinois is 70 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 58 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Gira Molson of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A prominent German leftist politician has launched plans to form a new party that some observers think could take votes away from the far-right Alternative for Germany. Sarah Wagenknecht, yesterday, Monday, presented her Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance for Reason and Fairness. The aim is formally to launch the party in January in time for European Parliament elections in June. 3 state elections in Germany's formerly communist East will follow next. Wagenknecht offers a combination of left-wing economic policy with high wages and generous benefits, and a restrictive approach to migration. She also questions some environmentalist plans to combat climate change and opposes current sanctions against Russia, which was once Germany's leading gas supplier, and German arms supplies to Ukraine. Wagenknecht is launching her project at a time when center-left Chancellor Olaf Scholz's quarrelsome three-party coalition is deeply unpopular. National polls show mainstream opposition conservatives leading and Alternative for Germany, or AfD, in second place with around 20% support. Wagenknecht, 54, grew up in East Germany and joined the ruling Communist Party in 1989. She was a prominent figure on its successor's hard left wing and in the Left Party, which emerged in 2005 when Eastern ex-communists merged with Western leftists disgruntled with welfare state cuts. The new party's immediate political effect is to endanger the Left Party, which only just managed to stay in the German parliament in the 2021 national election. Wagenknecht was co-leader of the party's parliamentary group from 2015 to 2019, but long-running internal tensions have grown into a deep rift. The Left Party's leadership backs a generous approach to migrants and strong action against climate change.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Justin Spike of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Prime Minister Viktor Orban compared Hungary's membership in the European Union to more than 4 decades of Soviet occupation of his country during a speech yesterday commemorating the anniversary of Hungary's 1956 anti-Soviet revolution. Speaking to a select group of guests in the city of Veszprém, Orbán accused the EU of seeking to strip Hungary of its identity by imposing a model of liberal democracy that he said Hungarians reject. Brussels, the de facto capital of the EU, employs methods against Hungary that harken back to the days of Soviet domination by Moscow, he said. Today, things pop up that remind us of the Soviet times. Yes, it happens that history repeats itself, Orbán said at the event, from which all media were excluded except Hungary's state broadcaster. Nothing Soviet about that, of course. Fortunately, what once was tragedy is now a comedy at best. Fortunately, Brussels is not Moscow. Moscow was a tragedy. Brussels is just a bad contemporary parody, Orbán mocked. The October 23rd national holiday commemorates the beginning of a 1956 popular uprising against Soviet repression that began in Hungary's capital, Budapest, and spread across the country. After Hungary's Stalinist leader was successfully ousted and Soviet troops were forced out of the capital, a directive from Moscow sent the Red Army back into Budapest and brutally suppressed the revolution, killing as many as 3,000 civilians and destroying much of the city. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin J'ai regardé